Well, hello, and welcome to Thingamajigs, the exciting history of mundane things. I am Ben.
And I am Danielle. So we talked about sugar, and I meant to make the very next episode about artificial sweeteners, but I guess I forgot because I went on a long tangent about laundry. I don't know, but here's the skinny on artificial sweeteners. That was a diet joke. The skinny, you get it?
Question.
Yeah.
Is this one gonna be a bummer?
No.
Oh, good. Because sugar was a bummer.
I guess it really depends on how you feel about artificial sweeteners. But no, there's no real bummer about it.
Wonderful. I'll allow it.
So what was the first artificial sweetener? We are going to take another classic Thingamajigs trip to ancient Rome, which I found very surprising because I thought artificial sweeteners history started in the 19th century, like relatively recently. That is until I learned what ancient Rome was using as an artificial sweetener. And then I was like, okay, yeah, why not? That tracks for the time period. Lead.
Good old lead. Is there anything it cannot do?
It really is an amazing element. It's such a shame that it's poisonous. Much like asbestos, lead had a bright future.
I was gonna say that. Asbestos, it's like there's some kind of natural balance. Lead and asbestos were too good. They had to be nerfed. So they were deadly.
Now, how did this happen? Lead isn't usually sweet, right? That's kind of a weird thing to have happened. Nope. Lead has a naturally sweet taste.
Yep.
No one ever told me that.
That's why lead paint was such a concern, because kids would start licking the walls and sucking on their Matchbox cars and getting a nice mouthful of lead.
Yeah, I guess no one told me because we're not supposed to eat it, so it doesn't matter. But still, it's fascinating. It's like it knows it's poisonous, and so it uses the hook of sweetness to lure its victims. Obviously not, but still, it's so interesting. So the Romans enjoyed lead. It was used a lot in different ways. I think most damaging would be in their aqueducts, which we praise a lot on this show, but there's the truth. They were kind of a little poisonous.
Yeah, so were our pipes.
Yeah, we still have lead pipe problems. They use it in their cookware and their utensils, lots of other things too, but the things you put in your mouth are especially bad. It's been speculated that the use of all the lead is a reason for the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, there's lots of smart people debate that, but it's possible.
That's a pretty big assumption.
People were steadily getting sicker. We don't need to get into all the symptoms of lead poisoning, but one of them is cognitive issues, which is so sad because when I think of the ancient Romans, I think of a time of innovation that was beyond, I'll just say beyond what we had in the coming years. So lead, it's sweet. And boy did the Romans like putting it in things, most notably their wine. Well, first let's talk about how they got the lead into their food and drink. They made this thing called sapa, which was boiling grapes into a syrup, and it was noticeably sweeter when boiled in lead pots. And this was one of those sweeteners you could add to everything. They put it in their wine. It was really anything they wanted to sweeten. So this lead-dense syrup is getting added to a lot of different things that they're consuming, and one of the early side effects of lead poisoning is a metallic taste in your mouth. And if I had to guess, they probably tried getting rid of that by eating more sapa because it tasted good. So that was a vicious cycle.
That is awful. That is an awful thing you are telling me. I hate the thought of it.
Sorry, does that count as a bummer?
As long as it gets better from here, we're good.
Okay, well, let's get into Pliny the Elder.
Oh, boy.
Pliny was all about this. Huge supporter of sapa. He even called it a product of art, not of nature. Which kind of sounds like those people that are really into brewing their own beers and meads. He recommended it being boiled in lead pots, but more interestingly, he said you have to boil it when there is no moon. And throw in walnuts because that was would absorb the smoke.
Oh, that guy was such an idiot.
Oh, come on now. He's only working off of the information he had at the time. I do want to add that sapa is not bad. You recreate that same recipe, but don't boil it in a lead pot, and it's fine.
But it doesn't taste as good.
I mean, now it would, because you can add artificial sweeteners. And then the world of artificial sweetener was quiet. I'm not even sure that we would call lead an artificial sweetener. But it's sweet, and it's not sugar or honey, so that qualifies, right? We didn't discover a new alternative, and a zero-calorie one at that, until 1879, when we discovered saccharin. It is 300 times sweeter than sugar, and this was by accident. We weren't working on this. Konstantin Fahlberg, also Ira Remsen, but we'll get to that part, was working at Johns Hopkins University, and in his own words, it was partially by accident and partly by study. I had worked a long time on the compound radicals and substitution products of coal tar.
Coal tar?
Mm-hmm, that's what he was working on.
And he ended up with sweetener?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds awful leady to me.
He goes on to say that he was working late and forgot about dinner, so he rushed home without washing his hands, and when he got home, he sat down with a piece of bread. He called it unspeakably sweet, but he didn't really question it. He just assumed it was made that way, maybe a piece of cake or something. But then he wiped his mouth with a napkin, and he said that napkin was sweeter than the bread. And at that point, he was like, okay, something screwy is going on. So he tried a few other things and realized he was what was making everything so sweet.
Is the moral of the story wash your hands or don't wash your hands?
Oh my gosh, the moral of many of these stories is wash your hands.
If Thingamajigs can achieve one mission, it's to tell the people that they should wash their hands.
So it kind of dawned on him, I have discovered a substance that out-sugared sugar. Obviously, he rushes back to his lab, and this next bit is a quote because I thought it was funny in a way. In my excitement, I tasted the contents of every beaker and evaporating dish on the table. Luckily for me, none contained any corrosive or poisonous liquids. This story could have ended so differently. The next day, his colleagues find him dead in the lab, and no one would have known why he was eating his equipment. So remember that colleague, Ira Remsen? Well, there is heated discussion surrounding their involvement together in the invention of saccharin. Fahlberg supposedly got permission from Remsen to use the lab for his own research, and neither of them seemed too interested in the potential commercial value of the product, but they did publish their findings in a paper together. So as you can imagine, he was pretty upset when Fahlberg was awarded patents in 1886 after he had left the lab and didn't mention him at all, claiming he had discovered it alone.
I mean, it kind of sounds like he did. He was just using his lab, right? Or was that a lie?
I have no comments on the involvement of either of these men. Supposedly he wanted recognition and not money, but I don't know. People have a hard time not wanting money. I do like this quote from Ira Remsen's Wikipedia. Fahlberg would soon grow wealthy, while Remsen merely grew irritated. And he definitely thought that Fahlberg was a scoundrel. So this leads us to Harvey Wiley. He is known as the father of the Pure Food and Drug Act. He was also a chemist, so he fits right in to this story, and people kind of thought it was a little strange that the enforcement of the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 was given to the Bureau of Chemistry, but they had scientific qualifications. So there were things that hadn't yet been specified in the law, like preserving chemicals. The Secretary of Agriculture appointed a referee board of consulting scientists headed by none other than Ira Remsen. And guess what was on the list of hot topic issues?
Hot topic.
Saccharin.
Oh.
Along with other stuff like bleached flour and caffeine.
Hot topic issues. How about cheap graphic t-shirts? Hot topic issues.
Oh, because Hot Topic has a lot of graphic t-shirts.
More like low quality piercings.
Can you get piercings at Hot Topic? I thought you could only get that at like tattoo parlors and Claire's for some reason.
I don't think they pierce, but they sell a lot of jewelry.
Ah, okay. In 1908, Wiley suggested the first saccharin ban, and it wasn't that his tests had proven that saccharin was dangerous, but that it wasn't a suitable substitute for sugar in his eyes, and that as a coal tar derivative, it couldn't possibly be fit for human consumption.
I mean, we eat salt. It's just a mineral.
A delicious mineral.
Potassium, that's a mineral. We eat a lot of minerals. Minerals are good sometimes.
So he was like, I'm going to take this straight to the president. President Theodore Roosevelt himself. And he's going to pat me on the back and say, you've done such a good job bringing this food product that has no nutritional value to my attention. But that is not how it went down. I don't know if Wiley didn't know that Theodore Roosevelt was getting prescribed saccharin by his doctor in an effort for weight loss treatment, but President Roosevelt rebutted with, anyone who says saccharin is injurious to health is an idiot.
Oof. That is an unfortunate move for him.
It was an unfortunate move for Wiley, for sure. It was decided by the FDA that saccharin was fine and preferable to use in moderate quantities. President Roosevelt this is going to sound bold, but he kind of ended Wiley's career.
He did end that man's career. And if it wasn't for him using saccharin instead of sugar, it might have gotten banned.
The scientific world is always changing, and that is because we're always learning new things. That's why we go back and forth on what foods are good and bad for us. People get really upset when every year we're changing our stance on eggs or coffee or wine. Wine is one of those things I think is funny that we say is good for us because of the antioxidants, which I'm not saying in any way antioxidants aren't good for us, but what I am saying is that you can get those same antioxidants from a glass of grape juice and skip all the health issues that come from alcohol.
You're like, go eat a blueberry.
But people enjoy alcohol, and that's fine. You are an adult. You don't need a justification for consuming a glass of wine. Just enjoy your glass of wine and stop pretending it's so good for you. So saccharin came under scrutiny again in the early 70s. It was linked to the development of bladder cancer in lab rats. They're going to take it off the shelves, but decided a warning label was good enough. So, of course, Congress mandated additional studies of saccharin. More than 30 human studies concluded that the bladder cancer found in the lab rats was irrelevant to humans and that saccharin was safe for human consumption. One of the issues with the studies done on rats was that they were being fed unrealistic amounts of it, like the equivalent of 800 12-ounce diet sodas daily. I'm not even sure if someone could consume that many diet sodas in one day.
Is that a challenge?
No, but I'm pretty sure you'd vomit, right?
Are you daring me right now?
Yes.
Don't challenge me if you're not ready for the results.
I don't want to take on the financial burden of providing you with 800 diet sodas daily for however long it takes to prove that you're right.
Not to mention the medical bills.
But the big kicker was the function of proteins in the urinary tract of rats that didn't apply to humans. Humans metabolize it differently. I would love to read some papers on the issues of comparing lab rats tests to human trials. There are a lot of issues. One being that we are not rats, and two, or I should say, rats are not people.
I'm sorry, have you met men?
The way that we treat rats is also really, really bad. In 2000, the National Toxicology Program of the National Institute of Health concluded that saccharin should be removed from the list of potential carcinogens. And that is from an FDA.gov website.
So they removed it from the list?
Yes.
Okay.
And took down all the warning labels, obviously.
So it's safe in moderation like most things again.
Yes. Oh, and I should probably include the brand name since that's what we look at. Sweet and Low, the little pink packets, that's saccharin. There was a sweet little kitty that would come to the clinic, and I thought its name was Sweet and Low, but its name was Sweet Lou, but I called it Sweet and Low. Which all of this makes sense now why my mom was so worried about us drinking diet sodas as children. Because she was an active grocery store shopper in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and this persisted a long time. It wasn't until the 2000s when the warning label came down. Also, it's allowed in most countries. It makes me feel better when everyone agrees like that. It's on the market in the European Union and Canada.
Makes you feel safe.
Safer. So what's next on our artificial sweetener list? We aren't going to go through all of them. We're just going to hit the big ones. Cyclamate is an artificial sweetener that was discovered in 1937 by graduate student Michael Sveda.
I had a cyclamate till he got hit by that car.
But it was only 30 to 50 times sweeter than sugar, so it's less potent. Wah, wah. So Michael was working in the lab and he set his cigarette down. Also, he was working on a fever-reducing drug, so again, it's not like we were working towards anything sweet.
Smoking in the lab.
I know. So he sets his cigarette down on a bench, and when he goes back to pick it up and put it in his mouth, he realizes it's sweet.
All these stories remind me of how LSD was discovered.
How was LSD discovered?
The guy was just messing with a bunch of chemicals in his lab, and then he kind of put the end of his pen in his mouth. At least that's the story anyway.
That's a fun day at work. It was thought that maybe it would be a good product to add to drugs to help with nasty, bitter drug flavors. Cyclamate is something we tried adding to saccharin to help with aftertaste of both the products, but it was also found to cause bladder cancer in lab rats and was banned. Also, a Dr. Jacqueline Verrett had been injecting fertilized chicken eggs with it, and it was causing deformities in the chicken embryos. There's this disturbing yet kind of funny story about someone carrying deformed chicken embryos into the FDA commissioner's office.
So, if I understand right, somebody just walks into the commissioner's office of the FDA, and they're like, "Hey, look at these chickens. They look weird, right?" That's bad.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it went.
How'd that go for them?
These embryos, they're messed up.
He said, "Hey, this is the FDA, not the F doesn't stand for farmers. Go tell it to somebody who cares."
We have since concluded that cyclamate does not cause birth defects in mammals. It's available in other countries, but it's still banned here in the US. At the time, the acting director for the FDA in 1980 said, "The matter was taken out of the hands of the scientists here and handled by attorneys." So, I think that's gonna be wrapped up in Congress for a while. I don't think we're gonna see any cyclamate for a while.
Well, that's fine. We already have the best sweetener.
No skipping ahead. Aspartame, discovered by James Schlater in 1965.
Not the best sweetener.
He was a
Spoiler
chemist,
alert.
and again, he was not working on sweeteners. He was actually working on an anti-ulcer drug.
Interesting.
He's quoted saying, "I licked my fingers and they tasted good." I don't know, man. If I was working in a chemistry lab, I don't think I would follow that intrusive thought.
Okay, so the moral of the story is not about washing your hands. It's about how often you should lick your hands.
Which is never.
Frequently. You could be a millionaire.
I don't know. What do I know? I don't know anything about amino acids and proteins. I am not a chemist. They probably lick everything all the time.
Did it cure his ulcers?
I'm gonna go with no.
Ooh.
Anyway, we're gonna stop at the surface history of aspartame because I am not here to tell you what you should and should not be eating. I will say that you should not bake with aspartame. If it is exposed to prolonged heat, it will break down and lose its sweetness.
Worthless.
I will also say that the company that created and pushed for the FDA approval for aspartame has been accused of sloppy research regarding aspartame and other drugs they've produced. That is not me saying that aspartame is dangerous. Aspartame has been studied by plenty of independent parties. That is me saying that G.D. Searle has been accused and probably has done some shady things, and aspartame could be a casualty of that negligence. I have no strong opinions about aspartame.
What drug companies haven't been accused and convicted of horrible, horrible things? You know, they're just doing their job.
I don't know if this is true, but supposedly G.D. Searle was involved with placing the most corrupted FDA, I don't remember if he was a commissioner or what, and Like, he's known as the worst that the FDA has ever seen.
Number 1, baby. Let's go.
So, GD Searle is shady at best. Sucralose.
Yay!
Or as we know it, Splenda, otherwise known as Ben's favorite artificial sweetener.
It's the best.
It's about 600 times sweeter than sugar. I feel like at this point, why are we comparing? Like, this feels a lot like saying 300 horsepower to describe how powerful a car is. We're getting out of the range of relevant measurement. 600 times sweeter is I don't even know how to wrap my brain around that.
How many times sweeter than lead is it?
We don't know. We can't find any participants.
We need people to lick this lead.
So this one is due to a misunderstanding. A researcher was asked to test it, and they thought they were told to taste it. Well, they didn't die, so that's good. And also, it was incredibly sweet. So sucralose was discovered in 1976. The fun thing about sucralose is that it is sugar. It's sugar that has been chemically altered with chlorine. So they replaced 3 hydroxyl groups with 3 chlorine atoms. And that sounds scary at first, and then I remember that all of my city water is treated with chlorine, so it's actually not that crazy.
Chlorine can be bad, but they have studied the effects of the chlorine in sucralose extensively and determined that it didn't really matter.
Also, Splenda can be used almost entirely the same way you would use sugar. So it can be baked, fried, heated for an extended period of time, and it won't break down into something toxic, which is always a worry whenever you're talking about chemical compounds.
Sounds pretty perfect, doesn't it?
But it is partially metabolized, so it's not completely 0 calorie. There was a 3-month study of 128 people with diabetes, and they were given 3 times the maximum estimated daily intake and showed no adverse effects regarding their blood glucose control.
Sounds pretty miraculous.
I do realize that's kind of a small sample size, but whatever. A packet of Splenda has about 3 calories, so it's really not much. Just notable that it's not 0.
And like 1 packet is all you ever need. Seems like no matter what you're putting it in or what size it is, 1 packet, that's the sweet spot.
I think less than 5 calories is considered 0 calories.
Yep. No calories is defined as 5 or fewer calories per serving.
One huge benefit of artificial sweeteners is they don't contribute to tooth decay. That's a big deal.
It's too good, honestly. All this thinking about lead and asbestos has got me worried about sucralose now. In 20 years, we're going to be like, gosh, I can't believe they used to eat that.
Probably. We're always learning and growing and finding out more bad things that we're doing. Remember when cigarettes was good for you, or at least wasn't bad for you?
Endorsed by doctors everywhere.
Too much of anything is bad. If you're concerned about artificial sweeteners, just don't consume them. Because the bottom line is we don't really know. Nothing has come out saying it's absolutely bad for you, but we don't know. Hey, this is one of those times that they didn't know. MD Anderson Cancer Center doesn't condemn artificial sweeteners. They don't condemn sugar either. They do recommend, like I feel any doctor would, a more well-balanced nutritional diet. They did say that high body weight is more strongly, convincingly linked to cancer risk, and it made me want to ask them, well, like, how do you think they ended up in the high body weight category? Which I know there are so many reasons for a person to be overweight, but diet is pretty high on that list.
Yeah, that is a difficult metric there, isn't it?
We did not add stevia to this list because stevia is not artificial. It is a natural sweetener. It just happens to also be 0 calorie.
And it still tastes like plants and isn't very good.
My mom loves stevia.
Stevia?
I've heard a lot of people say stevia. I figured I would throw it in there. Throw you off your rhythm.
Yeah, you really messed me up there. I don't know what to do now.
Close us out, Ben.
Got any PSAs? Oh. Well, PSA. Don't use more than 1 pack of Splenda. PSA, stevia's gross. PSA,
That's
sugar.
not a public service
Sugar's kind of
announcement.
gross too. Smells like butts.
Sugar does smell bad.
Smells like butts.
I don't know. I remember the first time I smelled sugar, and it was like in the last 5 years. I don't know why I had never smelled sugar before, but I opened my sugar jar and I got a whiff of it, and I was like, oh my gosh, why does that smell so bad? I thought maybe I didn't clean the jar properly, but no, that's just what sugar smells like.
Mm-hmm.
Go smell your sugar. It's weird.
Smells like butts. Go smell a butt and then go smell a sugar.
It's not as bad as butt, but it is kind of like...
It's like a well-worn butt.
Okay.
You know, let the butt be... Clean the butt. Let it sit for a day or two, depending on the...
Environment, how hot and sweaty you are.
Yeah, and then smell the butt. And then smell the sugar. And maybe sprinkle some sugar on the butt, if that's what you're into. I'm not here to preach at you. PSA, don't eat lead.
That is a good public service announcement. That one is much better than stevia is gross.
Well, this has been Thingamajigs and another exciting history of a mundane thing. I want to hear from you. What's your favorite sweetener? You a classic sugar consumer? Or are you a Chad sucralose enjoyer? Let us know in the comments on YouTube or in the Q&A section on Spotify, or send us an email if you're an old person, I guess. Don't forget to grab a goose and stop washing your hands. You might just discover the next big thing.
Thingamajigs does not support unwashed hands.
Thanks for listening.
Nah, go! Forgive me by you.